The College Football Playoff Committee is asking Brett Yormark to forfeit the Big 12's first round bye. His answer? No. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Off the top, the College Football Playoff Committee wants Brett Yormark, the Big 12, to forfeit their first round bye in the playoff and forfeit $4 million in doing so. Here's why the commissioner said no and the feathers that will ruffle. TJ Pittenger will join us for that, as well as Deion Sanders. Cam, the athletic director at Colorado, asked for more money for his staff and an NIL, and apparently reports say the answer was no. This dispute could lead to Deion chasing after NFL jobs even more so. And finally, we did a segment last week with the Big 12 closing in on SEC football that was never in the big show, and I want to add it because I think it's actually pretty informational with Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football about how the gap is not as wide as it used to be. If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. Brett Yormark, why did you say no to this new proposal?
Brett Yormark not playing games and maybe slighting the College Football Playoff Committee. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, TJ, it's very interesting here. Brett Yormark said a couple of weeks ago after the first rankings came out that in no world, there was no way that a group of 5 school should be ranked behind the Big 12 in the college football playoff. What he was upset about was the way that teams are ranked in this 12-team playoff format. So then the college football playoff board comes to Yormark, they come to Sankey, Petiti, and they say, all right, everybody, we understand this year was a bit of a crapshoot. You're all complaining about the way that we seed these things, so let's change it. Now, it has to be unanimous. We look around the room. We say all 10 commissioners plus Notre Dame who gets the same vote as a Brett Yormark. All 10 commissioners in Notre Dame. We are going to change the format of the playoff. We will basically seed everybody as we think that they are. And instead of giving byes to the conference champions, we'll just give you a rank and we'll move on. To which Brett Yormark said, hey, wait a second. I do think that we should be ranked above a group of 5 school like Boise State based on strength of schedule, but also, no, because you would have made Arizona State the number 12 team. And if we're judging by the college football playoff poll, the AP poll, they're a top 10 team. They proved that against Texas. There were 2 massive calls. One, a game-winning touchdown that could have been overturned that lost them that game. And if we just put this in your hands entirely and didn't have a safety net over the Big 12, our best school would have been 12th in the country going on the road in a raucous environment somewhere. And, oh, hey, also, by the way, Boise State and Indiana, like we've heard, TJ, so many people complain, oh, well, it was a way easier path for a Penn State to go as far as they did. If they were to have seeded 1 through 12, just best to worst based on this year and the way the poll finished, it would have been number 8, Boise State, hosting number 9, Indiana. And you would have heard the exact same complaints from Tennessee or Ohio State saying, well, why do they get to play Boise State in round 1? Why does Boise State have it so easy playing Indiana and we've got to go play Ohio State? So no matter what the College Football Playoff Board right now is saying is we need to appease these major conferences, these big 2, because they're upset. And Brett Yormark says, if it's unanimous and I can hold out on this, I'm not voting yes. And then he turns to the commissioner of the Mountain West Conference, and she says, I'm not doing that either. And then he turns to the ACC, and their commissioner says, Jim Phillips says, I'm out. This doesn't make any sense. We're going to give them the autonomy to rank the SEC and the Big 10 numbers 1 through 9, and then pity party 3 other teams, 1 from the Big 12, 1 from the ACC, 1 from the Mountain West. And what we proved this postseason is you can't do that. You can't do that and it be fair in college football because Big 12 teams are better than we thought they were. Boise State is more competitive, though they lost that game, was more competitive than many people thought they would be. Ashton Genty deserved to be in the college football playoff. So all Brett Yormark is doing is saying, hey, yeah, there are some issues with the way we place these teams, some issues with the college football playoff. But if you think you can just rank the Big 12 team that you want to 12th every year, I'm not falling for it. I'm not voting for it. We'll hold out as long as we need to. This is Yormark putting his foot down, no matter who he pisses off.
He's going to be able to probably hold out for this year. But when we get to 2026 and we get to a new format or no format that's agreed upon, do you think he's able to hold out there? Or do you think that the change is inevitable?
Here is why I think he'll struggle to hold out, because he couldn't hold out when it came to the playoff compensation formula they drafted up this year, saying that the Big 12 would be far behind the Big 10, far behind the SEC, and not get an equal playoff share as those two conferences. That was really tough for Yormark to fight off, and he couldn't fight it off for very long. He looked for help from the dead Pac-12, now the Pac-2, and Kirk Schultz, the president from Washington State. Every direction Yormark could go was, hey, someone please help me. Do you understand? They are, based on this perceived notion, giving those two conferences way more money than they're giving us without even doing this 12-team format. Not even once have we been given an opportunity to compete. And from there, he was strong-armed into accepting less money, and now in 2026, he'll be strong-armed into something different. Or at the end of the day, this monopoly that is the SEC, or this conglomerate of SEC and Big Ten leadership will look at Brett Yormark and say, adapt or die, which basically means accept what we want you to do, or we will tear your conference to shreds. That's where college football has gotten today, is this big major bully ball. And honestly, it's the TV networks that pull the strings. I don't believe that Fox is a major part of that. Fox has a huge investment in the Big 12. If the Big 12 went away tomorrow, Fox would not like that very much. If Deion Sanders in Colorado went away tomorrow, they would not be happy. Whereas ESPN, they have vested interest in one league, and that's the SEC. Now, do they have money in the ACC and the Big 12? No doubt. But the SEC is their stock that they need to grow. And so where it sits right now, Yormark will be strong-armed, no doubt. And that's just the era of college football that we're in, where money calls the shots.
Is there a possible happy medium? I've seen people talk about going to 14, and then you give the SEC and the Big 10 4 auto bids. You give the Big 12 and the ACC 2, and then you duke it out between the rest of them, maybe a group of 5 and maybe one at large. Is that more palatable than what we have now? Because at least you'd get 2 in every time. Maybe they can change the money around to kind of help with that. Now you're always going to get half as much, even if they made the money even, unless you get that third bid, right? Then you get 3/4 of it as much. But do you think that that's maybe what is the equitable solution? What's the best case scenario maybe for the Big 12?
I'm going to need someone to bear with me here. This is going to be tough. What I'm about to say is going to be tough to digest. With a 12-team playoff, we are judging the hottest team in college football at the end of the year. We're judging the hottest team in a tournament format. I spent 5 years covering high school football in Texas, and a lot of times the team that will win the Texas high school football state championship at any level was the team that got hot, had the fewest injuries. They were the team that was able to they were durable enough that when not in a 1-game setting, but in a 6-game tournament setting, they could win to the very end. You saw it this year where seeds 5 through 8 were made up the Final Four. Maybe in a vacuum, in a 1-game scenario, Georgia's the best team in the country. Maybe it's Alabama. Maybe it's Texas. Those weren't the schools that won it overall. Ohio State was best suited to win a national championship in a tournament format. You saw Ohio State lose to Michigan. In a 1-game format, things are a lot different. That was the BCS era. In a 2-game format with the Final Four of the college football playoff, 4 teams, that was different. To make it equitable, what I would just love to see, and people have proposed this, what if instead of a conference championship, you go 4 teams? 4 teams, mini tournament at the conference level, and from there, you play your way into a conference championship. So from 4 teams down to 2, and then each league sends its representative to the college football playoff. Maybe it's 8, and you loop in the AAC in the Mountain West. And from there, there's no crying, there's no moaning. Everybody got 1 in, and from this point, we play 3 rounds of football to determine a national champion. Maybe that's not the most fair way to do it, but I think it's fun to see. There are no oh, I'm so mad you didn't put my X team in. No. Now you legitimately go win your conference, show that you're the best regionally, and from there you can compete for a national championship. You might think, oh, that's so stupid. The NFL, we give a free playoff spot to division winners no matter what their record is. They won their division. Yeah. In college football, I think it's regional enough still you could possibly do the same.
Yeah, you're right. We always get an NFL team that's got like a 500 record or maybe just below 500, and they get not only a playoff game like Boise State and Arizona State, they get a home playoff game for winning their division because there's such a prize placed on that. And as we get closer and closer and closer to the NFL, which I don't love for a lot of reasons, as we get closer and closer and closer to that model, it probably needs to be the way that we get teams into the postseason as well.
No doubt. I don't mind following the best football league in the world.
Yeah.
Today's show is brought to you by Talkspace. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, communicate more effectively, but finding the right therapist, fitting sessions into your busy schedule is hard. That's where Talkspace comes in. They're the leading virtual therapy provider, making it easy to get the help you need. It's affordable, accessible as well. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. Match with a licensed therapist in 48 hours. It's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your own home, message a therapist between appointments, and covered by most insurance. For insured members, there's a $0 copay for many of them. It has never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month. That's $80 off your first month. If you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege, enter promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege, enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for this show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege, promo code SPACE80.
Let's talk a little bit about Coach Prime and some Colorado drama. We all know, Drake, about the rumors of the Raiders. They got squashed. And then the Cowboys, where at one point, I haven't checked today, he was the betting favorite to be the new coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I will say in the last week, some of that has quieted some. It's not necessarily front page news anymore. But something interesting that came out was a little bit of a money dispute, a little bit of an argument with the athletic department, the athletic director there, and Coach Prime looking for more money for NIL, more money for assistants, his staff. What's impressive to me about that is Coach Prime's not asking for a raise. He's not asking for more money for himself. The rumors are that he wants to basically turn Colorado into a better team, a better program, a more legitimate contender for the whole thing. Do you buy the rumors that the AD is maybe strong-arming there a little bit?
I am very surprised that anybody associated with the athletic department at Colorado who's ahead of Deion Sanders, a la the athletic director, or even the Board of Regents or the University president, would balk at an idea or request that Deion has. Jane Slater of Slater NFL reported, one thing to watch following Jerry Jones' initial discussions with Deion. Two people with knowledge of the situation tell me that Sanders approached Rick George, the AD at Colorado, about additional money for NIL and staff, met with resistance. Colorado would not confirm or deny. Sanders did not respond when we reached out to for comment. If this is true, what the AD is saying is, hey, Deion, you brought in, per the Coloradoan, $113 million. Home games bring in $113 million in an economic boost to the city of Boulder. That is a stunning number. That's not just helping. I can't imagine at that point what the university's numbers look like. The admissions numbers look like 51% jump in Colorado multimedia revenue because of Deion Sanders. Whatever they're paying them, they are making hand over fist more than that based on what he's bringing in. One Reddit study said that Colorado Deion Sanders, he may be worth $280 million when it comes to what he brings to those schools. This is what's called the Prime effect. And if he wanted to tomorrow, sorry to Colorado fans, he could bring it to Auburn. He could bring it to Florida. He could bring it to the Dallas Cowboys. What I would do is say, look, I get it. You know, I'm the athletic director at Colorado. Oh, I'm high and mighty. I'm in Boulder. I will bend over backwards for the guy who has completely changed athletics at my university, who is paying my bills, who is keeping the lights on in our city. I'm not going to say no when that guy's request is not give me a gold-plated office. It's give me more for NIL so I can continue to grow this program and win games. Give me more to keep my assistants happy. Not rework my contract and pay me. No. He's looking out for his guys, and it is idiocy, stupidity at the top if you don't say yes based on what this guy, you're saying no to your lottery ticket. And that's a really weird thing to be saying no to.
Yeah, it's so shocking to even hear that, which I'm sure Slater does a good job. Like, I'm not doubting the report, but man, that is an insane thing to hear because of what you just mentioned. Not just for the program, not just for the college, but for the entire region, the entire city that has seen that boom. And so I hope that's not true. If we lose Coach Prime from the Big 12, from college football, from the sport that we all love the most, and he goes to the NFL because of this, that would be the greatest catastrophe. It would probably cost him his job. Like, it would probably cost the AD his job. There's no way that you could withstand that, losing Coach Prime because you got into a strong-arming battle. I didn't really buy the Coach Prime to NFL stuff, even with him being the favorite and the Cowboys job and the relationship with Jones and all this stuff. Does this make you a little bit more leery of him sticking around? Do you think that there might be a greater chance that he leaves because of this?
There's definitely a better chance in any of these scenarios, even if it's minor, there's a better chance that he leaves because of a dispute of this nature. And think about it from your own perspective. If you tomorrow have this big new bright idea that you bring to your company's headquarters and say, hey, let's up it. Let's plus our product by doing this. Next thing you know, that company starts bringing in $100 million more because of your idea. And granted, you've already got a pretty good salary, but you start thinking, I don't need my salary to change, but the guy in the cubicle next to me does just as good work. I want him to get his. Go to your big bosses and say, hey, I had this big new idea. Could you help out my friends around me? Maybe give them a bit more compensation? And they say no. At that point, maybe you don't leave the company. Maybe Deion doesn't leave Colorado, but it's not helping your company rapport. It's not helping how much you enjoy being in that seat. And so take it from the perspective of putting yourself in Deion's shoes. This can't be a reaction from the athletic director that Deion is happy about. And again, we haven't seen this guy. It's really, really dark. The last time Boulder was put on the map in this way was an infamous murder in the 90s. Like, this is the one time that Colorado has gotten a huge boost to the city of Boulder because something positive has happened. You could argue a national championship that came to the Buffs 30 years ago was also another thing to hang your hat on. But most people didn't really know Boulder, and it hasn't been associated with athletic excellence at all in the last 15 years until Deion Sanders got there. So again, the guy that walked into the company day one and proved I can be the catalyst to making us a whole lot of money. He's not the big boss. He still has checks and balances, powers ahead of him. But at the same time, if you're one of those powers, understand that the second that employee leaves, there's no NDA here. Your entire palace falls apart.
I've got a take, and I want to see if you agree with it or not. But my thoughts, and I was asked this, why wasn't Coach Prime's name mentioned with other college football jobs this year? Why is it all NFL? Why not the idea of moving up to the SEC or the Big Ten? And what I told somebody was, this is the first year since 2019 that the SEC has all 16 coaches returning. There was no SEC job. How many Big Ten jobs are going to be open after the national championship, after this season is completed? Not many that I think Coach Prime would want. And so now North Carolina was open. They obviously went pretty big splash with Belichick. But even in the ACC, where Florida State was really bad, not open. SMU surprised, so obviously that's not going to open. Clemson, they're not moving on from Dabo. Mario at Miami. Did it surprise you still, though, that even with all those jobs not opening, that nobody really talks about Coach Prime in college football?
It didn't surprise me for the exact reason that you're mentioning here, TJ. North Carolina is maybe the only one that stands out. I don't think Deion would go somewhere else in the Big 12 from Colorado. He'd probably stay put with the Buffs. So West Virginia and UCF get taken out of the hat there. Washington State, Wake Forest, Purdue. I mean, none of that pushes the needle the way that you wouldn't want to restart at a place like that. And again, he has got the entire state of Colorado behind him. If you go to Purdue, if you go to Wake Forest, you're going to states that already have established Division I programs. Colorado, you get to be the flagship of that entire area. I mean, Colorado State would say different, but it's just not true. They are the kings of that state. And not only that, you've got pro teams that you get to rub elbows with. So we already know that there are built-in fan bases, large fan bases in these states. Again, the only one I could have seen was North Carolina, but the fact that they hit the ground running immediately and called Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick answered the phone and then eventually took the job was probably the reason we didn't hear at least a murmur of Deion Sanders' name being in that hat. And the only reason his name would have been in that hat is not for Chapel Hill. It's not for the basketball prowess or the football pedigree. It's for the Jordan brand. Deion mixed with the Jordan brand, could have done a lot of stuff, but it's still not worth leaving Colorado now. Had Florida come open, had Florida State come open, we're talking about a very different, or Auburn, a very different offseason. Deion Sanders is at least taking interviews with those schools. We know he took an interview, or at least reports have surfaced that he did with Jerry Jones, had a conversation. He's a businessman. He knows how to play the game. I just think that the right job wasn't open for him to seek one out in college football. Colorado benefits from that. And now maybe the only right job in the NFL will be the Dallas Cowboys, and it doesn't seem at the time of recording as if that's going to matriculate. Today's show is brought to you by GameTime. I find the best tickets to the biggest events very easy and for cheap with GameTime. attending NFL playoff games as well is an experience like no other. I remember my very first NFL football game Monday night, the Dallas Cowboys, the Philadelphia Eagles. I will never forget it. And you can have that experience, but in the playoffs for yourself and your loved ones. This year, Game Time makes it easier to create those unforgettable moments with Game Time picks. Filters out the fluff, shows you the best deals, great seats, so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use Game Time picks to grab tickets for NFL games, and you can do the same this playoff season. Found a super deal that gives me incredible value for amazing seats, and you can view the spot before you buy those tickets. And knowing my tickets are backed by Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. It's the reason I buy all my concerts, comedy, and NFL playoff tickets from Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, and that is guaranteed.
2 years in a row, Drake, the SEC will not win a national championship. I saw a product on the field, not so much that was, elevated to by the rest of college football, but that was brought down to where the rest of college football has been, or at least closer to it. I'd still probably say the SEC is the best conference. I just don't see the dominance that they used to have. The best team in the SEC is not even in the national championship game again.
It's Sarah McLaughlin.
Yeah, Drake is
with me playing the world's smallest violin alongside it. Yeah, I don't think anybody in America is upset by this. The SEC is not what it was. And what I want to do is take historical context out of this conversation, because guess what? 2019 LSU, all time. 2009 Alabama, all time. 2011 Alabama, all time. Like, they're great SEC teams of the last 15 years. But today, on January, whatever it is, of the year of our Lord 2025, the SEC is not what it was. And as long as Paul Feinbaum or Kirk Herbstreit or Nick Saban or Pat McAfee or anybody with the big four letters wants to tell you the SEC is bigger and badder and better, and Kirby Smart says the 2 of the 4 in the college football playoff were way better than the other 2, or you go over and you hear Lane Kiffin spewing stuff about that conference, it won't matter. Those will just be empty words. As long as they're doing that, it won't matter, because the SEC for the second straight year not only won't win a national championship, definitely not a Big 12 championship, they won't win a national championship, and they won't even go to the game. It is so red button level that Greg Sankey found it appropriate to say to the media, I like being the underdog. Now we feel like the underdog. You cannot argue for 4 teams in the college football playoff or automatic bids more than another league and then say, oh, but we're the underdog and we like that. The rhetoric coming out of that conference, the rhetoric coming out of the 4 letters is laughable at this point, and the SEC today is not what it was 5 years ago, because college football's playing field is starting to even itself out.
Yeah, and I think the way to look at least that I see it, Drake, is that when an SEC program was run at its very best and was playing its best football, there was no one in the country that could touch them. I watched this for 15 to 20 years. I remember an undefeated Notre Dame going to the national championship game against Alabama once upon a time. They got blasted. Now Notre Dame goes up against the SEC champions, a program under a head coach that's won 2 national championships in a row and almost a third. Maybe they had if we'd expanded the playoff 1 season earlier. And I watched them beat them on the same field. And I don't think that a quarterback in Carson Beck, who's now at Miami, of course, would have made the difference in that game, because I watched Notre Dame win in the trenches. I watched them control the ball, run it down their throats to end the game. I watched them win at the line of scrimmage and strip Gunnar Stockton there at the end of the half. Like, those were things that just didn't happen before, even just a couple of years ago. You can attribute it to realignment. You can attribute it to NIL, portal, whatever you want. But the second best team in the SEC, and yes, Texas was the second best team, whatever you think of their playoff hopes. They lost to Georgia twice. They were not as good as the Bulldogs. They had every opportunity. They were 4th and 13 away from losing to the Big 12 champs, who nobody gave a shot in that game. So I'm not proclaiming the SEC is never going to win a national championship and we should just get used to this. No, they can still get to that level. It's just that the ability for other programs to put a team on the field that is at that same level, it's clearly easier than what it was, because this isn't just one season. This is 2 seasons in a row now. Once you can write off, but twice, it looks like we've got a trend here, and I don't see who that dominant team would be in 2025.
Again, those legendary SEC teams that I named, like a Cam Newton-led Auburn or a Mark Ingram-led Alabama, those schools weren't losing to Northern Illinois. They were winning national championships going away. Notre Dame might win a national championship having beaten Georgia while also losing to Northern Illinois. So I don't think this is just the Big Ten or Big Ten caliber teams catching up to the SEC. I think it's all of college football evening itself out because of 2 things, the transfer portal and NIL. Oh, wow, I must be some prophetic genius. No, everyone knows that. It is obvious. What's happening is 4- and 5-star blue chip prospects are going to Alabama or Georgia or Texas, getting chewed up and spit out in year number 1, entering the transfer portal, going to Oregon State, falling flat on their face. They miss home, and then they end up at NIU. And guess what? That blue chip, they still can play some football. They still can revive their career. What you're seeing is these former 4 stars and 5 stars have a lot of opportunities to go and instantly rehabilitate their careers at smaller universities. They are doing that. And then conversely, a Texas Tech can look around and go, what if we got a whole bunch of our friends together and called it the Matador Club? That's a cute name. And then we put millions and millions and millions of dollars into a pot, and we start giving it to 21-year-olds who can do the fun little football thing on the field and make us more competitive on a national scale. It is changing the nature of everything in this sport. Not just the SEC and the Big Ten having a gap that's closing, but the Big 12's right there too. And I want to argue the ACC is keeping up with that, but they went 1-9 in the postseason and
not good.
Thinker there at the end of the year.
Though, let me defend the ACC for a moment. Their best team went toe-to-toe with Texas. I watched the game. I know Texas was better.
Yes, I agree.
But that was not a blowout of a game. They had the lead, but came back. I mean, Clemson's
their best team, though, I still feel like Miami. That was the problem. We talked about the Big 12 would eat itself alive. It didn't do it as much as the ACC did at the top. Like Miami losing to Georgia Tech and Syracuse.
But Miami's
and Clemson
defense
losing
was
3 games.
Miami's defense was truly awful. Clemson was the most balanced team. I think that's why they were able to win at the end of the day.
But then again, also SMU was a mid-major last year. Like they were,
and I think that's another great example. Is hey, SMU played a tight game with Clemson, who played competitively with Texas, and Arizona State played Texas tight, and so did Ohio State. Like I just think, and I don't think it's a bad thing for the sport necessarily, because I've come across a lot of college sports fans, not just for football, in my time in the last couple of years, who have been frustrated with the transfer portal. Man, these kids just leave. Man, they just go. And I get it. At some level, I truly do understand that frustration. But you have to understand, if you're at a smaller school or not as big of a brand, there is another side to it. And the other side is that, yes, kids go out the door, but kids come in the door at the same time who never before the transfer portal would have come onto campus. I think NIL is a part of it, that they have the opportunity to give them financial incentives that maybe only certain schools were giving before NIL became legalized. I think the portal is far more impactful here. And, whether or not Greg Sankey looks at the last couple of seasons and says, look, we need to expand the playoff even more, because I believe somebody like Alabama or Ole Miss or South Carolina could have, made a run in the playoff. I won't be surprised if any of that happens. But I think that the SEC being so much better than everyone else is a perception that has to go away. And I think that it has gone away over the course of this year, and then the postseason as well. The way everything is gone, you don't have an argument right now if you are an SEC homer to say, well, the SEC is head and shoulders above everybody else. Which data point are you going to?
Yeah, and this goes for Coastal Carolina, who they lost their 2-star running back who became a 5-star caliber transfer, right? And this is a hypothetical, but that kind of school is going to lose a kid who deserves to play at a higher level of college football. But conversely, they get the redshirt freshman who's coming from Texas that never would have considered Coastal Carolina earlier, and
who wasn't going to play for 2 years because they have 3 other blue chip receivers in the room, or what have you.
Correct. Or because they went to Western Kentucky and plucked that former 3-star who's now a 2-year starter for the Hilltoppers. That's the way college football has evened itself out. So the SEC is not necessarily, I don't want to say the SEC is on a downward trajectory. everyone else is just on an upward trajectory. Everything's evening itself out because of the total chaos. So you may hate it and you may think it's ruining college football, but it truly is making this playing field really, really cool. Even if the first round was a bunch of blowouts, a couple of those were SEC teams getting blown out. Like we're watching those teams lose too. This isn't just something brand new in college football that is destroying
everything. Brand new in football. The NFL is the king of parity, right? Wild card weekend, the first 3 games, 2 of them were just absolute positive blowouts. It's like, should they put the Bengals in because the Bengals had Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and they could, all right.
This is Spencer. I grew up in Arkansas, Valonia, Arkansas. Sorry, SEC. We're not saying that you are a terrible league now, or that you're down, or that you're in the dumpster, that you're just on a
They still
downward
recruit at a high level. That still matters.
Right. We're saying everybody else is getting a lot of your players actually now because they're transferring down, and that's evening things out. And look, ESPN has struggled to carry major products. They don't carry the NFL, and the NFL is doing fine. But the MLB, the NBA, NHL, now with the SEC in hand, I'm interested to see how that plays out.
I think everyone else is rising up more than the SEC is dropping down. I do think there's a slight drop down, but I don't think it's as severe as the jump up that everybody else is making. Drake Toll of Locked On at Big 12. I was segment now.
Knowledgeable and good today, Spencer.
I know. That's very strange and unusual. You want to talk strange and unusual?